Metal screamed against metal, heat, suffocating, wet. It hit me in a solid wall smelling of rosemary and rendering lamb fat. I blinked. Steam hissed from a station to my left. The floor was slick under my soles. My collar felt too tight, scratchy, starch digging into the tender skin of my neck. Where was I? A shoulder checked mine, hard, no apology. Move it, runner, runner. I looked down at my hands. They were gripping a tray, a silver oval heavy loaded with miniature crab cakes. My knuckles were white. Why was I holding a tray? The noise was a physical weight. Orders shouted in Spanish and English, the clatter of ceramic on steel, the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of a knife hitting a cutting board, and underneath it all a thumping bass line bleeding through the double doors. Table 4 needs water. Table 7 is waiting on apps. The voice was familiar, not the words, the tone, that specific pitch of demand that expected instant obedience. My head swam. I took a breath, but the air was just grease and garlic. Then I saw the ticket machine, chick, 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 spitting out white paper. Doyle wedding. Table 1. Doyle. My stomach dropped. The floor seemed to tilt. I wasn't a runner. I wasn't a server. I was Colleen Margaret Doyle. I was 46 years old. I was the managing partner of Horizon Capital Partners. But I was standing in the kitchen of the Emerald Table wearing a polyester uniform that smelled like industrial detergent. The dizziness cleared, leaving behind a cold, sharp edge. I remembered the pen in my hand at 9 o'clock this morning, the heavy cream paper of the acquisition agreement, the signature that transferred ownership of 12 restaurant locations and $85 million in assets to my firm. I remembered driving here, changing in the staff locker room, putting my Patek Philippe watch back on my wrist even though it violated the uniform code. I remembered why I did it, just to see, just to know. One shift, one last look at the operation from the ground up before I announced myself as the new owner on Monday. I hadn't looked at the reservation list. Ms. Doyle. The voice was quiet, too respectful for a kitchen during service. I turned. Marcus Chen stood there holding a clipboard against his chest like a shield. He was the general manager, the only person in this building who knew that the woman in the server's uniform could fire him with a text message. Colleen, I said. My voice sounded rusty. Just Colleen tonight, Marcus. He didn't relax. His eyes darted to the swinging doors, then back to me. He looked like a man trying to defuse a bomb with a pair of safety scissors. You don't have to do this, he said. I'm fine, just getting the lay of the land. No? He stepped closer. The noise of the kitchen seemed to fade around us. I mean, you don't have to take table 1. I adjusted the tray on my shoulder. It's just a table, Marcus. They asked for you. My thumb twitched, pressed into the side of my index finger. What? The father of the bride, Marcus said. He looked miserable. He stopped me, asked for the server who looks like his daughter. The heat in the kitchen suddenly felt like ice. He said she's probably back there somewhere. Marcus continued, his voice barely audible over the sizzle of a sauté pan. He said you should be the one to serve them, specifically. My left hand began to throb, a phantom ache in the center of my palm. I looked down at the scar there, a jagged white line from a burn I got when I was 19 working a line just like this one. Did he? I said. It wasn't a question. I can tell them you're on break, Marcus said quickly. I can put you on the patio section, or you can just go. You're the owner, Colleen. You can walk out that door and have them escorted out. I looked at the swinging doors. Through the small wire-reinforced windows, I could see flashes of light, the purple and gold of the reception. My sister's wedding. 28 years. That was how long I had been running. 28 years of missed holidays, of brief phone calls, of sending checks that were never acknowledged. 28 years of building an empire in the silence, waiting for the day I would be big enough, successful enough that they couldn't look down on me anymore. And tonight, my father had requested me. Not as a guest, not as his daughter, as help. He wanted to see me serve. No, I said. The word was soft, but it felt hard in my mouth, like a stone. Colleen, I'll take the table. Are you sure? I looked at Marcus. Really looked at him. He was a good manager, protective, smart. I made a mental note to review his compensation package on Monday. If they ask who I am, I said I'm exactly who they think I am. I lifted the tray higher. The muscles in my arm remembered the weight. They remembered the balance. Until I'm not. I turned and walked toward the doors. I should have stopped. I should have listened to the warning bell ringing in the back of my skull. But I didn't. I pushed through the metal doors and stepped out of the heat and into the air-conditioned chill of the ballroom. The sensory shift was jarring. The smell of grease vanished, replaced by expensive perfume and stargazer lilies. The harsh fluorescent light was gone, swapped for the amber glow of crystal chandeliers. 200 people. 200 witnesses in black tie and silk. And right in the center, directly under the main chandelier, was table 1. I saw them before they saw me. My mother Bernie was wearing champagne lace. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her shoulders hunched forward as if she were trying to make herself smaller. My sister Bryn was at the head table, but she was looking toward her parents. She looked stunning in ivory, but her smile was tight, fixed. And my father. Frank Doyle sat with his back to the room, one arm draped over the back of his chair. He held a glass of whiskey in his other hand. The amber liquid sloshed as he gestured, talking to the man beside him. I moved through the crowd. I was invisible. That was the superpower of the uniform. Guests stepped aside without looking at me. I was furniture. I was a mechanism for food delivery. I reached the table. Champagne, I asked. Frank froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. He turned slowly. His face was redder than I remembered. There were broken capillaries across his nose that hadn't been there 5 years ago. But the eyes were the same. Pale blue. Hard. Well, 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 he said. His voice carried. It cut through the low murmur of conversation like a dropped plate. He stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the parquet floor. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank spread his arms. I want you to meet someone. He gestured at me like I was a party trick. This is my oldest daughter, Colleen. He waited for the reaction. The guests at the table, my Aunt Kathleen, Uncle Pat, a few cousins shifted in their seats. They looked at their plates. She couldn't be bothered to dress up for her sister's wedding, Frank boomed. She had to work. He said the word work like it was a disease. Hello, Dad, I said. My voice was steady. I set a fresh glass of champagne down in front of my mother. She didn't look up. She touched my fingers, a quick fluttery brush of dry skin, and then pulled her hand back as if I were hot to the touch. Frank, please, she whispered. Please, what, Bernie? Frank laughed. I'm introducing her. Look at her, 46 years old and still carrying trays. He leaned in, his breath heavy with whiskey and mint. I told you, didn't I? He said to the table, but his eyes were locked on mine. I told her when she was 18. I said, Colleen, you go to that hotel school, you're gonna end up serving people who actually made something of themselves. Didn't I say that? Yes, Dad, you said that. And look at you. He shook his head, a performance of tragic disappointment. Could have been a doctor, could have been a lawyer, but no. She had to follow her passion. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was damp, clammy. What's this? He lifted my hand. The sleeve of my uniform pulled back, revealing the Patek Philippe. The rose gold caught the light. Look at this, Bernie. Look at this watch. He twisted my arm to show the table. Nice knockoff, Collie. Where did you get it, Canal Street? It was a gift, I said. I didn't pull away. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of struggling. A gift, he snorted. From who? One of your line cook boyfriends. From a friend. Right, A friend. He dropped my hand. It hit my side with a dull thud. That's what you're doing with your life, collecting fake watches and serving shrimp to your sister's in-laws. He sat back down, picking up his whiskey. You know why we picked this place, Collie. The air in the room seemed to go thin. Bryn works here, sure. That's nice. But I wanted to see it. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of the glass. I wanted to see you in your natural habitat. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had won a bet. I wanted everyone to see exactly what happens when you don't listen to your father. The silence at the table was absolute. I could feel the eyes of the guests at the surrounding tables boring into my back. I felt a muscle jump in my jaw. I clamped my teeth together until my skull ached. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a coincidence that the wedding was here. It wasn't chance. He had orchestrated this. He had paid for a reception at the one place he knew I couldn't avoid just to prove a point, just to show me my place. Can I get you anything else, sir? I asked. Yeah. Frank lifted his empty glass. He rattled the ice cubes. Another round, and keep them coming. My daughter is buying tonight. He laughed. A bark of a sound. With her tips. I took the glass. The crystal was warm from his hand. Right away. I turned and walked away. I kept my back straight. I kept my steps even. I didn't run. I would not run. I made it to the bar before my hands started to shake. I set the tray down on the mahogany counter with a rattle. I gripped the edge of the wood, digging my nails into the varnish. That bad? The voice came from my left. Ellie Vance was sitting on a bar stool, looking entirely out of place and utterly magnificent. She was wearing a burgundy dress that cost more than the average car, and her hair was pulled up in an elegant architectural knot. She was my business partner, my best friend, my lawyer, and tonight she was my +1 disguised as a colleague from work. She took a sip of her martini, her eyes tracking Frank across the room. He picked this place on purpose, I said. My voice sounded hollow. To humiliate me. I heard, Ellie said calmly. I think the valet parking attendant heard. She reached into her purse. A small black moleskin notebook appeared. She opened it, uncapped a pen, and made a quick note. We could end this right now, she said, not looking up from the page. One phone call. I tell Marcus to grab the microphone. We announce the ownership transfer effective this morning. We throw them out. No. Ellie stopped writing. She looked at me. Colleen? Not yet. You're torturing yourself. I'm gathering evidence. You're gathering pain, she corrected. She snapped the notebook shut. He just called you a failure in front of 200 people. What more do you need? I need to know, I said. I looked back at table 1. Frank was holding court, gesturing wildly. Bernie was nodding her smile, fixed and terrified. I need to know how far he'll go. I need to know if there's any bottom to it. And if there isn't, then I'll know that too. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers, drowning out our conversation. Please welcome for the first time as husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Connor Walsh. The doors swung open. The spotlight hit them. Bryn looked beautiful. She really did. She was laughing, holding Connor's hand. Connor looked happy but dazed. They moved to the dance floor for the first dance, but Frank was already standing up. He had a microphone in his hand. He wasn't waiting for the schedule. He wasn't waiting for anything. Hold on, Frank shouted. The feedback whined. Before we dance, I want to say something. A toast. The music cut out awkwardly. Bryn froze in the center of the floor. She looked at her father and her smile faltered. I picked up a fresh tray of champagne. I moved to the edge of the crowd. I needed to be close. I needed to hear it. To my Bryn, Frank said, his voice thick with emotion and whiskey. My youngest, the one who stayed. He raised his glass. Some children, you raise them right and they turn out right. They listen. They understand loyalty." He looked at Bryn, but his body was angled toward me. Even in the shadows, even in the uniform, he found me. "And some children," he said. "They just break your heart. They run off to chase fantasies because they think they're too good for their family." He took a step toward the dance floor. "Bryn, you made us proud. You got a real job. You found a real husband. A surgeon." He clapped Connor on the shoulder hard. Connor winced. "You didn't end up... Well, we all see what happens when you don't listen." He gestured vaguely in my direction. He didn't even say my name this time. I was just the example, the warning. "To Bryn," Frank bellowed, "the daughter who actually made something of herself. To Bryn." The room murmured obediently. Connor didn't drink. He stood there holding his glass, and he looked across the room. He looked right at me, his brow furrowed. He looked down at my shoes, the Louboutins I hadn't changed out of. Then he looked at his father-in-law. I stood perfectly still. The tray was heavy, but I didn't feel the weight anymore. I felt cold, a pure crystalline cold that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. Frank downed his drink in one swallow. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he saw me. He waved his empty glass in the air. "Collie," he shouted. "Hey, we're empty over here. What are you waiting for, an invitation?" He snapped his fingers. Snap, snap. "Move it, chop chop." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me. I took a step forward. "Coming, Dad," I whispered. I walked out of the shadows and into the light. The walk to table 1 felt like crossing a minefield. Every step was measured. Every breath was calculated. I could feel the heat of 200 pairs of eyes on my back, but the only ones that mattered were the blue, watery eyes of the man sitting at the head of the table. "There she is," Frank boomed. He gestured with his empty glass, a conductor orchestrating his own little symphony of humiliation. "Everyone, this is my oldest. Colleen. She is going to be our personal server tonight. Aren't you, Collie?" My mother reached for his arm, her fingers looking brittle against his black suit jacket. "Frank, maybe we should let the staff..." No, it is perfect." He shook her off without looking at her. "She works here, doesn't she?" "This is what she does." He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "So do it. Serve us." I stopped at his elbow. The smell of whiskey was stronger now, mixed with the cloying scent of the lilies in the centerpiece. A woman at the next table, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a decade, looked away, suddenly fascinated by her napkin. I picked up the bottle of wine from the table. My hand was steady. Years of boardroom negotiations had taught me how to turn my face into a mask. "I assume you would like to start with the red," I said. Frank laughed. It was a wet, heavy sound. "Hear that? She is professional. Very professional." He turned to the man on his right, the groom's father. "This is what happens when you let your kids follow their dreams, Bob. They end up reciting wine lists at other people's weddings." I poured the wine. I didn't spill a drop. The dark liquid swirled in the glass, settling into a deep ruby pool. "So Collie," Frank said, watching me pour. "What is the special tonight? What do you recommend to your family?" "The braised lamb stew," I said. "The lamb stew," he snorted. "You hear that? She has memorized the menu and everything. It is slow-cooked for 12 hours with root vegetables and a Guinness reduction." I continued, my voice flat. "It is served over coal cannon mash." Frank rolled his eyes. "Fancy Irish stew. That is all it is. Peasant food dressed up for a wedding." "It is a family recipe," I said. He paused. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since I had approached the table. His eyebrows drew together. "Whose family? Ours," I said. He blinked. Then he laughed again, louder this time. "Ours. Since when do the Doyles have fancy recipes? Your mother burns toast, and I certainly didn't teach you how to cook." "No," I thought. "You didn't. You taught me that my value was conditional. You taught me that unless I was a doctor or a lawyer or a captain in the fire department, I was invisible. Grandma Doyle taught me, I said. Frank waved a hand, dismissing the memory. My mother? She barely cooked. She was a saint, but she wasn't a chef. She taught me on Sundays, I said, keeping my voice low so only the table could hear. When I was 12, in her kitchen in Southie. She said the secret was browning the meat in batches so it didn't steam. Frank stared at me. For a second, the bluster faltered. He looked confused, like a man trying to read a map in a language he didn't speak. Then the moment passed. The arrogance rushed back in to fill the void. Well, he said, lifting his wine glass, I guess it is good you learned something useful from her. God knows you didn't learn how to make a living. He turned his back on me. I will put the order in, I said. I turned and walked away. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor, a steady, rhythmic countdown. I made it through the swinging doors of the kitchen before my vision blurred. I didn't stop at the service station. I kept walking past the line cooks, past the dish pit where the steam rose in thick gray clouds all the way to the back office. I opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me. The silence was sudden and shocking. I leaned back against the wood. My hands, which had been perfectly steady in the ballroom, started to shake, a fine, violent tremor that rattled the empty tray I was still holding. I set the tray on a filing cabinet. I pressed my palms against my eyes. I was 46 years old. I owned 12 restaurants. I had negotiated deals that made grown men cry in conference rooms. And my father could still reduce me to a sullen, hurt teenager with 3 sentences. The door opened. I straightened immediately, dropping my hands. The mask slammed back into place. It was Marcus. He stepped inside holding a manila file folder. He looked at me, taking in the rigid posture, the white knuckles. You okay? He asked. I am fine. You don't look fine. You look like you are about to buy the building next door, just to burn it down. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. Don't tempt me, Marcus. He walked over to the desk and set the folder down. I was going through the transition documents, the debt transfers from the previous ownership. I took a breath, forcing the air deep into my lungs. I don't need to see those until Monday. I think you need to see this one tonight. There was something in his voice, a quiet urgency that made me look at him. Marcus wasn't prone to drama. If he said I needed to look, I needed to look. I walked over to the desk. I opened the folder. It was a standard promissory note, one of dozens I had seen during the due diligence phase of the acquisition. I scanned the header. Lender Sullivan Holdings, LLC. Borrower, Francis J. Doyle. I froze. I read it again. Francis J. Doyle. I looked at the date. 2 years ago. I looked at the amount. Principal $50,000. Balance due $35,000. The room seemed to tilt. I reached out and gripped the edge of the desk. He borrowed money from Mickey Sullivan, I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Marcus nodded. Mickey told me about it when we were closing the books. He said your father came to him 2 years ago. Said he needed to invest in Bryn's future. Something about a down payment on a condo or helping with the wedding costs. I stared at the paper. $50,000. 2 years ago, Frank had told me he couldn't come to my birthday dinner because money was tight. 2 years ago, he had told me I was selfish for buying a new car when the family was struggling. And he had borrowed $50,000 from the man who owned the restaurant where his daughters worked. Did he pay it, I asked. Marcus hesitated. He made a few payments. Then they stopped. Mickey was lenient. Because of Bryn. Because she was an employee. I looked at the transfer clause at the bottom of the page. All rights, title, and interest in this note are hereby assigned to the buyer. The buyer was Horizon Capital Partners. The buyer was me. My father didn't just owe money to a restaurant owner. He owed $35,000 to the daughter he had just mocked for being poor. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The tight, hot ball of humiliation that had been sitting there for the last hour began to unravel. It was replaced by something colder, something harder. "He has no idea," I whispered. "No," Marcus said. "He doesn't." I ran my finger over the signature at the bottom. Francis J. Doyle. The handwriting was bold aggressive, taking up more space than it needed. Just like him. Does he know about the transfer? He knows the debt was sold with the business, Marcus said. But he doesn't know who bought the business. As far as he knows, he owes money to a faceless investment firm in Boston. I closed the folder. I picked it up. The paper felt heavy, like it was made of lead. "Marcus," I said, "when the time comes, and I will let you know when I want you to bring this folder to table 1. "Yes, ma'am, and bring the itemized list of payments, or lack thereof." He nodded. Anything else? I checked my reflection in the dark window of the office. The server's uniform still looked cheap. The apron was still stained with a speck of red wine. But the woman wearing it looked different. "Yes," I said. "Make sure we have plenty of the lamb stew. It seems my father has a sudden appetite for family history." I walked out of the office. The kitchen was louder now, the dinner rush in full swing. I moved through the chaos, my mind working like a spreadsheet. I was calculating leverage. I was assessing risk. I pushed through the service doors into the narrow hallway that ran behind the ballroom. It was a shortcut used by the staff, lined with stacked chairs and extra tables. A figure in white was standing near the ice machine. "Bryn." She spun around when she heard the door open. Her veil was pushed back and her eyes were red. She looked like a princess who had been caught crying in the scullery. "Colleen," she breathed. She rushed forward, her satin skirt rustling against the linoleum floor. She grabbed my arm. Her hands were shaking. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice was high-tight with panic. "I swear to God, Colleen, I didn't know he was going to do that." I looked down at her hand on my arm. Her manicure was perfect. French tips. "Didn't you?" I asked. She flinched. "I chose this place because I work here," she said. "Because I get a discount. Because I thought if it was my workplace, you might actually feel comfortable coming, since you never come to the house anymore." I pulled my arm away gently. "And Dad choosing to humiliate me in front of 200 people, I asked. "Was that part of the discount package? I didn't know about that part," she said. Tears spilled over her lashes. "I just wanted you here. It is my wedding, Colleen. I wanted my sister." I studied her face. My little sister. The one I used to walk to school. The one I used to protect from the neighborhood bullies. But I couldn't protect her from Frank. Or maybe I had protected her too well, and that was why she was the golden child, and I was the disappointment. "You have worked here for 3 years, Bryn," I said. So you have seen me. You have seen me come in here on Saturdays. You have seen me talk to Marcus. You have seen the way the staff treats me." She looked away, her gaze fixed on a stack of napkins. "I have never said a word," she whispered. "Exactly." I took a step closer. "You never said a word to me, and you never said a word to them. You let Dad believe I was scraping by on tips. You let Mom sigh about my wasted potential." "What was I supposed to say?" she snapped, looking back at me. The tears were gone, replaced by a flash of defensive anger. "Hey, Dad, I think Colleen is secretly rich. I think she is lying to us. You could have said she seems happy. You could have said she is good at her job." I did say that. But you didn't say the rest." She slumped against the wall, the fight draining out of her. "It is complicated," she said. "You know how he is. If I contradicted him, if I told him he was wrong about you, he would just get louder. He would make it my fault." I knew that was true. That was the Doyle family dynamic. Frank was the sun, and we were just planets orbiting his ego. If you got out of line, you got burned. But Bryn wasn't a child anymore. She was 38 years old. She was a wife. "Just tonight," she said. She reached for my hand again. "Can we just get through tonight? Please, Colleen. I only get one wedding. Don't make a scene. Don't make him angry." I looked at her pleading face. I thought about the document in the office. I thought about the $35,000. I could burn it all down right now. I could walk into that ballroom and destroy the fantasy they had all been living in, but not yet. "Fine," I said. Bryn exhaled a long, shuddering sound. "Thank you. Oh my God, thank you." "Tonight," I said. My voice was hard. "Just tonight. But after tonight, Bryn, things change. Do you understand?" She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yes." "Okay. Whatever you say." She didn't understand. She thought I meant I would go back to being the distant sister, the failure who sent nice gifts. She didn't know the world had already shifted under her feet. "Go back inside," I said. "Your husband is waiting." She squeezed my hand one last time, then gathered her skirts and hurried back toward the ballroom. I watched her go. I adjusted my apron. I smoothed the front of my shirt. I walked back into the noise. The ballroom was a blur of motion. Waiters were weaving through the tables with plates of salad. The band was playing something soft and inoffensive. I moved on autopilot. I filled water glasses. I cleared bread plates. I became the invisible machine again, but my mind was racing. I could end this. One word to Marcus. One announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce the new owner of the Emerald Table." I imagined the look on Frank's face, the shock, the sputtering denial. My mother's hand flying to her mouth. Bryn's relief, or maybe her horror. But that wasn't enough. That was a reveal. A plot twist. I didn't want a plot twist. I wanted a reckoning. I wanted him to say it all. Every insult, every dismissal. I wanted him to empty the chamber. I wanted witnesses. I wanted documentation. I wanted my father to dig his own grave so deep that when I finally handed him the shovel, he wouldn't be able to climb out. I passed the bar. Ellie was still there, nursing her martini. She caught my eye as I walked by with a pitcher of water. "Well," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "Not yet," I said. "Colleen, you are torturing yourself." "No." I looked across the room at table 1. Frank was laughing at something, his face flushed and triumphant. He looked like a king in his castle. "I am building a case," I said. I moved past her toward the table. "Hey, Collie." Frank's voice boomed out again. "We need more wine over here, and bring the red this time. The good stuff, not the vinegar you usually serve." "Coming, Dad," I said. I walked toward him. The debt document burned in my mind like a brand. The night was young, and he had so much more to lose. The service hallway was a different world. The air was cooler here, smelling of old linoleum and dust rather than expensive perfume and roasted lamb. The emergency exit light cast a dull, bloody glow over the stacked chairs lining the wall. Ellie Vance leaned against the cinder blocks, her arms crossed over her chest. The muffled bass of the wedding band vibrated through the wall behind her, a rhythmic thumping that sounded like a giant heartbeat. "Last chance," Ellie said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, stripped of the lawyerly polish she used in boardrooms. "Walk out that door, get in the car, and we are back in Boston by 10. We have that conference call tomorrow for the Napa properties. We go back to normal life." I adjusted the collar of my uniform. It was starting to chafe. "Define normal," I said. "Not standing in a service hallway watching your family publicly disown you." I laughed, but the sound had no humor in it. "That has been my normal for 28 years, Elle. It doesn't have to be." I looked at the heavy steel door that led to the parking lot. It would be so easy. I could push the bar step out into the cool October night and drive away. I could leave Frank to his whiskey and Bernie to her denial. I could let them win. "If I leave now," I said, staring at the exit sign, "I will always be the daughter who couldn't take it. The one who ran, the one who proved them right. You don't owe them proof of anything. It is not for them." I turned to look at her. "It is for me." Ellie studied my face for a long moment. She was looking for cracks for the hesitation that usually came when I had to deal with my family. But she didn't find any. The trembling in my hands had stopped. The cold clarity from the office had settled into my bones. She reached into her purse and pulled out the black moleskin notebook. "I have been documenting," she said. "Every insult, approximate times, witnesses within earshot." I looked at the notebook. "You are a good lawyer. I am your friend who happens to be a good lawyer." She tucked the notebook back into her bag. "Whatever you are planning, I am in." "But Colleen." She paused her hand on the strap of her purse. "Make sure it is worth it. Make sure this ends somewhere you can live." "It ends tonight," I said. I pushed open the swinging doors and stepped back into the noise. The reception had shifted gears. The dinner plates were being cleared and the alcohol was flowing freely. The volume in the room had risen a cacophony of laughter and clinking glass. I made my way toward the bar to refill my water pitcher. The bartender, a kid named Jason, who looked terrified, gave me a sympathetic nod as I approached. Connor Walsh was standing at the end of the bar. The groom was alone. His new wife had been pulled away by a flock of bridesmaids in lavender chiffon, leaving him to nurse a bottle of beer. He wasn't smiling. He was watching the room with a surgeon's analytical gaze, dissecting the party like it was a complex procedure. I moved to the soda gun, keeping my head down. "Those shoes," Connor said. His voice was quiet. I almost missed it under the music. I paused. "Excuse me, Louboutin Pigalle," he said. "The Red Soul." He nodded at my feet. "My sister collects them. You are not wearing knockoffs." I looked at him. He was younger than me by a decade, with the kind of open, honest face that probably comforted terrified parents in the pediatric ward. But his eyes were sharp. "Most people don't notice shoes," I said. "I am a surgeon. Details matter." He took a sip of his beer. "The watch earlier. Your father said Canal Street. But that is a Patek Philippe Nautilus. My father has one. They don't make knockoffs that good." He didn't ask a question. He just let the observation hang in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. "You are very observant," I said. "And you are not what they say you are. Does that matter to me?" "No." He glanced toward table 1 where Frank was holding court, his face flushed and animated. "To them, probably more than they realize." I stepped closer to him. The invisible wall between server and guest thinned. "When things get complicated tonight," I said, lowering my voice, "stay with Bryn. Don't let them pull her into it." Connor's eyebrows rose. "Is that a warning or a request?" "It is an investment." I topped off my pitcher with ice. "Welcome to the family, Connor." I walked away before he could respond. Behind me, I heard him murmur something into his beer. I think I might be on the wrong side of this. I didn't have time to dwell on it. A shout cut through the air, loud and demanding. Collie Frank's voice rang out across the ballroom. Several tables turned to look. The conversations nearby died out instantly. "My glass is empty." "What am I paying you for?" A woman at the next table, someone's aunt with blue-rinsed hair, looked horrified. She whispered something to her husband, who shook his head. I walked over. My face was a blank slate. "Another Jameson?" I asked. "See?" Frank addressed the entire table, gesturing at me with a limp hand. "She knows. My daughter, the waitress, knows her whiskey." He laughed, looking around for validation. "Too bad she doesn't know anything else." I picked up the bottle from the center of the table. I poured. Frank Burney said, her voice thin and anxious. "Maybe slow down on the—" "I am fine," Frank snapped. He didn't look at her. "I am celebrating. My youngest is marrying a surgeon, a real professional, not like—" He waved his hand at me, a dismissive flick of the wrist. "Whatever this is." I didn't flinch. I filled the glass to the rim, watching the amber liquid rise. And then I felt it. A gaze. Heavy and panicked. I looked up. Bryn was watching from the head table. She wasn't looking at Frank. She was looking at me. Her expression was complicated. There was guilt there, yes, and fear. But underneath that, there was something else. Recognition. I had seen that face before, 8 years ago, at Cousin Maggie's wedding in Jersey. I had been careless. I had let something slip about the firm about a deal I was closing. I had seen Bryn pull out her phone under the table. I had seen her eyes widen as she scrolled. She knew. She had known for 8 years. She had known I wasn't a waitress. She had known I wasn't failing. She had seen the portfolio, the assets, the power. And she had said nothing. For 8 years she had watched our father belittle me. She had watched our mother sigh over my lost potential. She had watched me play the black sheep, the scapegoat, the cautionary tale. And she had stayed silent. Because it was easier. Because as long as I was the failure, she got to be the star. As long as I was the disappointment, she didn't have to share the spotlight. The golden child didn't have to be brave. That was the scapegoat's job. I finished pouring the whiskey. I set the bottle down with a soft click. "Enjoy your drink, Dad," I said. Frank didn't answer. He was already talking to Uncle Pat, bragging about Bryn's promotion at the restaurant. "Bryn works hard," he said. "She has a real career there, management material." I caught Bryn's eye again. She looked away quickly, staring down at her untouched wedding cake. I walked back toward the kitchen. The anger I had felt earlier was gone. It had burned itself out, leaving behind something cold and hard as diamond. Let him drink. Let him talk. Let him dig. The grave was getting deeper by the minute, and now I knew exactly who was going to fall into it with him. The kitchen was a different kind of chaotic now. The dinner rush was over, replaced by the frantic precision of plating desserts. Trays of miniature tartlets and chocolate mousse cups lined the stainless steel counters like soldiers ready for deployment. I walked in with my empty tray, and the energy shifted. It wasn't the usual dismissal the back-of-house staff gave to servers. It was something else, a quiet acknowledgement. Roberto, the sous chef, was wiping the rim of a dessert plate with a clean towel. He didn't look up as I approached, but he slid the plate toward me with a nod. "You are still here," he said. "Where else would I be?" I asked. "Most people would have walked." He paused, his dark eyes meeting mine. "I heard what that guy said. The loud one at table 1. Most people would have thrown their apron in his face and left." "I am not most people." "No," Roberto said. "You are not." He picked up another plate. "I remember your first week," he said. "You caught that cross-contamination with the shellfish on the prep line. The health inspector missed it. You didn't. You stopped the line." He pointed the towel at me. "You have the eye, Colleen. You don't belong on the floor carrying trays. You belong on the line, or running it." I felt a tightness in my throat that had nothing to do with Frank Doyle. This was respect, earned not by a bank balance or a title, but by the work. Marcus appeared at my elbow. He steered me toward the coffee station, away from the ears of the other cooks. "The staff is talking," he said quietly. "Let them talk." "No, listen." He lowered his voice. "They don't know who you are. They don't know about the acquisition or the capital firm. But they know who you are not." He glanced at the line cooks, then back at me. "They know you are not just a temp server. Nobody wears a watch worth a year's salary to bus tables unless they have a reason. They know you are here for a purpose." He paused, letting the weight of it settle. "They are with you, Colleen. Whatever is happening tonight, just say the word." I looked at Roberto, who was yelling at a line cook to watch his temperatures. I looked at the dishwasher, Luis, sweating over the steam sprayer. These were my people. They respected the work. And in a restaurant, the work was the only thing that mattered. "Tell the staff to be ready," I said. "When the time comes, follow my lead." Marcus nodded once. A sharp military motion. Understood. I picked up the tray of desserts. I walked back toward the double doors. The noise of the party swelled as I pushed through a wall of sound that hit me square in the chest. I moved to table 1. Frank was standing again. His tie was loosened, hanging crookedly around his neck. His face was a map of broken veins and gin blossoms flushed dark with alcohol and adrenaline. He held his glass high. The liquid inside sloshed dangerously near the rim. "Another toast," he shouted. The room quieted, but it was a reluctant silence. People were tired. They wanted cake. They wanted to dance. They didn't want another speech from the angry man at the head table. "To my family," Frank slurred. "My family." He spread his arms wide, encompassing the table, the room, the world. 2 daughters. He held up 2 fingers. 1, success. He pointed a thick finger at Bryn. She was sitting at the head table, staring down at her hands. She didn't look up. And 1 lesson. He swung his hand around and pointed directly at me. I was standing near the wall, the tray of desserts balanced on my left hand. I didn't move. I didn't look away. Murmurs rippled through the room. I saw a woman at table 4 whisper something to her husband, her face pinched with second-hand embarrassment. "Let me tell you something about lessons," Frank said. He swayed slightly, grabbing the back of his chair for balance. "I raised both these girls the same way. Same house, same opportunities, same love. But one listened, and one decided she knew better than her father." He laughed. It was a cruel, scratching sound. "You want to know why Colleen is carrying trays tonight? Because she thought her dreams mattered more than reality. She thought she was special." He leaned forward over the table, his eyes locking onto mine across the room. "She thought she was better than us." The air in the ballroom felt thin, sucked out by the sheer force of his malice. "You are not special, Collie," he said. "You are not better. You are just stubborn." My hand found the scar on my palm. I pressed my thumb into the raised tissue hard enough to hurt. 28 years of overachieving, of staying late, of reading contracts until my eyes burned, of building a portfolio that would make Wall Street veterans weep. And he could still make me feel like the 18-year-old girl holding a rejection letter he had predicted. Across the room at the bar, Ellie Vance locked eyes with me. She sat straight, her hand resting near her purse. Her eyebrows rose in a silent question. Now I looked at my father. He sat down heavily satisfied, accepting the nervous laughter of his table mates as tribute. I shook my head. A microscopic movement. Not yet. Close, but not yet. I moved through the room. I was a ghost in a white shirt. I served coffee, I cleared plates, and I listened. I needed the full picture. I needed the scope of the damage. At the family table, my Uncle Pat was leaning in toward Frank. "At least one of them turned out right," Pat said, nodding toward Bryn. Frank grunted. Colleen always was difficult, even as a kid. Too quiet, sneaky. I moved to the next table. My Aunt Kathleen was picking at her salmon. "It is a shame," she was saying to a cousin. But honestly, are we surprised Frank always said she didn't have the drive? I collected the words like stones. I weighed them. I polished them. I made my way to the bar. Ellie was waiting. "Well," I asked, keeping my voice low as I loaded dirty glasses into a rack. 17, Ellie said. 17 what? 17 documented statements of defamation or character assassination. She tapped the leather bag at her side. 3 from your mother, 2 from extended family, 12 from your father. She took a sip of water. I have timestamps for every single one, corroborating witnesses within earshot for 9 of them, and the debt document. "Ready when you are," she said. "Marcus has it staged in the manager's office." I nodded. This was what I knew. This was my ground. Due diligence, documentation. You didn't walk into a negotiation hoping for the best. You walked in with the leverage already in your pocket. My father thought he was just bullying his daughter at a wedding. He didn't know he was in a negotiation. He didn't know he had already lost. I gathered the tray of dirty glasses. "I am going to check on the bride," I said. Ellie glanced toward the head table. Bryn was gone. Her chair was empty. "Good luck," Ellie said. I didn't need luck. I had the truth. And tonight, the truth was going to be weaponized. I walked toward the exit looking for the flash of a white dress. Something had changed in the room. The air felt heavy, charged with static. The storm wasn't over. It was just finally breaking. The hallway leading to the powder room was a quiet pocket of air in the suffocating heat of the reception. The muffled bass of the wedding band vibrated through the floorboards, a dull thumping that felt like a headache waiting to happen. I walked slowly, my empty tray tucked under my arm. I needed a moment. Just 30 seconds of silence before I went back into the lion's den. Colleen. The voice was soft, familiar. It was the voice that used to sing me to sleep. The voice that used to tell me everything would be all right when I scraped my knees. I turned. My mother was standing near the entrance to the ladies' room. Bernie Doyle looked small in the hallway, her champagne-colored dress washing out her pale skin. She was wringing her hands, twisting her wedding ring round and round on her finger. "Mom," I said. "Everything okay?" She hurried toward me, her heels clicking rapidly on the tile. She reached out and grabbed my forearm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You need to let it go," she whispered. Her eyes darted toward the ballroom doors, as if she expected Frank to burst through them any second. "Let what go?" "Whatever you are planning." She looked up at me, her expression tight with anxiety. "I can see it in your face, Colleen. You have that look. You have always had that look when you are about to do something dramatic." I stared at her. "Dramatic? Like leave for college?" I asked. "Like pay my own tuition because Dad gambled away the college fund? Like ruin your sister's wedding?" she hissed. I pulled my arm back. "Ruin it! I am serving the cake, Mom. I am clearing the tables." "Your father has had a lot to drink," she said, rushing the words out. "He is stressed. He wants everything to be perfect for Bryn. He doesn't mean the things he says. He has said the same thing sober, Mom, for 28 years. That is not—" She stopped. She took a breath, smoothing the front of her dress. "Look, this is Bryn's night. Can't you just for once let someone else have something?" The air left my lungs in a rush. It felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. Let someone else have something. "You know what I mean?" she said, avoiding my eyes. "No," I said. My voice was very quiet, dangerous. "Tell me what you mean." Bernie's face hardened. The mask of the concerned peacemaker slipped, revealing the exhausted, resentful woman underneath. "You have always made everything about you," she said. "You always had to be difficult. You always had to prove you were smarter, better. You couldn't just fit in." She straightened her spine, trying to regain her authority. "Well, tonight isn't about you, Colleen. It is about your sister. Try to remember that." She brushed past me, leaving a trail of lavender perfume in her wake. She pushed open the ballroom doors and disappeared back into the party, back to her husband, back to the peace she maintained by sacrificing her firstborn. I stood alone in the hallway. And there it was. For decades I had told myself that my mother was a victim too. That she was trapped. That she wanted to defend me, but couldn't. I was wrong. Bernie didn't protect me from Frank. She protected Frank from the consequences of his own cruelty. She didn't want peace. She wanted silence, and I was done being silent. I adjusted my grip on the tray. I turned and walked back into the ballroom. The atmosphere had shifted. The dinner service was over, the cake had been cut, and the room had that loose, chaotic energy of an open bar entering its 4th hour. The crowd had thinned slightly. The older guests had retreated to the edges while the younger ones crowded the dance floor. Frank was at the bar. He was leaning heavily against the mahogany counter, his face a deep, alarming shade of crimson. He was shouting something to the bartender, gesturing wildly with a glass that was already spilling over. I moved to the far side of the room, collecting abandoned champagne flutes. I wanted to stay on the periphery. I wanted to finish the shift. But Frank spotted me. It was like a radar. He spun around, his eyes locking onto my white shirt across the crowded room. Something in his expression changed. The sloppy drunkenness sharpened into something focused, something mean. "Hey!" His voice cut through the music. The DJ actually lowered the volume, sensing the shift in tension. "Hey, everybody!" Frank shouted. He pushed off the bar, stumbling slightly before correcting his balance. "Before the night ends, I want to share something." Bernie appeared at his elbow instantly. "Frank," she murmured, tugging at his sleeve. "Frank, let's sit down." "No." He shook her off with a violent jerk of his arm. "No, this is important. Family is important." The room went quiet. Not the respectful silence of a toast, but the awkward, terrified silence of a train wreck in slow motion. Frank stepped into the center of the room. He pointed at me. "You see this woman?" he bellowed. I froze. I was holding a round tray loaded with half-empty glasses. I stood near the pillar exposed. My daughter Frank said, "My firstborn." His voice cracked. For a second it sounded like genuine emotion. Like grief. I had such hopes for her. Smart girl, good grades. She could have been anything. He walked toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one wanted to be in his path. But she threw it all away. For this. He was standing 3 feet in front of me now. I could smell the whiskey on his pores. I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. "For this," he screamed. He swung his arm. It wasn't a slap. It was a backhanded swipe at the tray I was holding. His hand connected with the metal rim. The tray flew from my grip. The sound was deafening. Glass shattered on the hardwood floor. Champagne exploded outward, soaking the hem of my trousers and splashing onto my shoes. My Louboutins. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone shouted, "Frank!" Frank didn't look at the mess. He looked at me. 46 years old and cleaning up after people he sneered, after strangers, because she thought she knew better than her family. I looked down at the broken shards glittering in the stage lights. A jagged piece of crystal lay next to my toe. Frank leaned in. He lowered his voice, but in the silence of the room, everyone heard him. "You want to know my biggest regret, Collie?" I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. "My biggest regret is that I couldn't make you understand. You were never special. You were never going to be anything. And instead of accepting that, instead of accepting us, you ran." He poked a finger toward my chest. He didn't touch me, but he might as well have. "You are not better than me," he hissed. "You are not better than any of us. You are just a waitress who couldn't admit she was wrong." The silence stretched. It was heavy, suffocating. For one terrible crystalline second, I believed him. The MBA from Wharton vanished. The $2 billion portfolio dissolved. The 12 restaurants, the 300 employees, the corner office in Boston. It all fell away. I was 18 years old again. I was standing in the kitchen in Southie holding an acceptance letter to Cornell while my father laughed and told me I was making a mistake. My eyes burned. A hot pressure built behind my nose. I could leave. I could turn around, walk out the door, get in Ellie's car, and drive until I ran out of gas. I could fly back to my life, to my success, and never speak to these people again. That is what the old Colleen would have done. Run. Hide. Succeed in silence. Let them have their myth because breaking it was too painful. But I was tired of running. I looked across the room. Ellie was standing by the bar. Her phone was in her hand. Her thumb was hovering over the screen. She was ready to make the call. She was ready to have security drag him out. I looked at her. I shook my head. Once, slowly. Then I knelt. I ignored the gasp from my mother. I ignored the whispers. I reached out and picked up a large shard of glass. A server, a young girl named Sarah, rushed forward with a broom. "Ma'am, let me." "I have got it," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't tremble. I picked up the glass, piece by piece. I piled the shards onto the dented tray. The champagne soaked into the knees of my trousers. The floor was sticky and cold. I moved methodically. I didn't rush. I cleaned up the mess my father had made, just like I had been doing my entire life. When the last piece of glass was on the tray, I stood up. I brushed off my knees. I adjusted my shirt. I looked Frank Doyle in the eye. He was blinking, swaying slightly. He had expected tears. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to run out of the room crying so he could play the victim. He hadn't expected this. "Will there be anything else, sir?" I asked. Frank stared at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had swung a sledgehammer at a wall and hit nothing but air. What he wheezed. "Anything else you would like to say?" I asked. I held his gaze. I didn't blink. I let him look at me. I let him see that he hadn't broken me. I let him see that he couldn't break me. Frank stepped back. He looked around the room, suddenly aware of the eyes, the silence, the judgment. He mumbled something unintelligible and turned away, stumbling back toward his table. I turned on my heel and walked to the kitchen. I pushed through the double doors. The heat hit me. The noise of the kitchen was a comfort after the deadly quiet of the ballroom. I set the tray of broken glass on the dish pit counter. Luis, the dishwasher, looked at me with wide eyes. He had heard the crash. Everyone had. I walked to the hand-washing station. I turned the water on as hot as I could stand it. I pumped soap into my palm. I scrubbed. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaky exhaustion. I know. I looked up. Marcus was standing beside me. His face was pale with fury. "You could have," he started. "I know I said." I kept scrubbing. "Are you still?" "Yes." I rinsed my hands. I reached for a paper towel and dried them slowly, checking each finger. No cuts, no blood. "Call the staff meeting for 10:45, I said. "I want everyone in the main hallway who is not on essential service." "You are doing it now?" Marcus asked. "Not yet." I crumpled the paper towel and tossed it in the trash. "But soon." I smoothed my hair. I checked my reflection in the stainless steel backsplash. The woman looking back at me was pale, but her eyes were clear. First, I said I need to talk to my sister. I turned and walked toward the back exit. I knew where she would be. The bridal suite. The place where people went to hide. I wasn't hiding anymore. The bridal suite was upstairs, tucked away from the noise of the ballroom. I walked up the carpeted stairs, my shoes squelching slightly with every step. The champagne had soaked through the leather of my soles, turning my $1,000 heels into cold, wet sponges. I reached the door. I didn't knock. I pushed it open. The room was small and stiflingly warm, smelling of hairspray, stale lilies, and anxious sweat. A garment rack stood in the corner, holding the plastic shrouds of bridesmaid dresses. The vanity mirror was lined with round bulbs that cast a harsh, unforgiving light on the woman sitting in front of it. Bryn. She was still in her wedding gown, the ivory satin pooling around the stool like spilled milk. Her veil was tossed on a chair. She was scrubbing at her face with a tissue, trying to fix the mascara that had tracked dark lines down her cheeks. She saw me in the mirror. She froze. "Colleen," she breathed. She turned around, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. I closed the door behind me. The lock clicked with a sound like a gunshot. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the flat effect of a judge reading a verdict. "Colleen, why?" "You knew," I repeated. I walked closer. 8 years. You knew. Bryn stood up. She wrung her hands, a gesture so like our mother that I felt a fresh wave of nausea. "I didn't know he was going to do that tonight," she stammered. "I swear. I am not talking about tonight, Bryn. I am talking about the last 8 years. I am talking about Cousin Maggie's wedding." She flinched. "You found the website," I said. "You saw the portfolio. Horizon Capital Partners. You saw my bio. You saw the assets under management. You knew exactly what I do. You knew exactly who I am." Bryn's face crumpled. She sank back onto the stool, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't. I couldn't." "You could," I said. My voice was low, but it filled the small room. "You just didn't." She looked up. Her expression was a messy cocktail of guilt and defensiveness. "What was I supposed to do?" she cried. "Tell Dad. You know what he is like. He would have said I was making it up. He would have said you paid someone to fake a website just to look important. You could have told me that you knew," I said. And then what she asked? Then you would have to choose. You would have to come back. You would have to deal with them. She gestured vaguely toward the door toward the party downstairs. "I thought you were happier this way," she said. "I thought you liked the distance. I thought I was protecting you." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Protecting me?" I asked. "Or protecting yourself?" What is that supposed to mean? It means that as long as I was the failure, you got to be the success without even trying. As long as I was the disappointment, you were the golden child. That is not fair, isn't it? I stepped into her personal space. I could see the pores in her skin under the heavy bridal makeup. "You let Dad humiliate me for a decade," I said. "You sat at Thanksgiving dinners and nodded along when he made jokes about my tips. You let Mom sigh about my wasted potential. You knew the truth. You held the card that could have stopped the game, and you never played it." Bryn looked down at her lap. She picked at a piece of lace on her bodice. "I was scared," she whispered. "I know," I said. I softened just a fraction. "I know you were scared. He is scary." I reached out and touched her shoulder. She flinched, then leaned into the touch. "But fear is a choice, Bryn. Silence is a choice." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "So what now?" she asked. "You are going to ruin my wedding. You are going to go down there and make a scene." I stepped back. "Your wedding was ruined the moment Dad knocked a tray of champagne out of my hands," I said. He was drunk," she protested weakly. "He was showing you who he is," I said. "Who he has always been." I walked to the door. I put my hand on the knob. "The question isn't who he is, Bryn. We know who he is. The question is, who are you?" She stared at me. "Whose side are you on?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just sat there in her beautiful, expensive dress, trapped in the silence she had built for herself. That was an answer. I opened the door and walked out. I needed air. I needed to get away from the smell of guilt and lilies. I headed for the back stairs, intending to slip out the side exit to the parking lot. I didn't make it. They were waiting for me in the hallway outside the ballroom. It was an ambush. Frank stood in the center, flanked by Bernie. My Uncle Pat and Aunt Kathleen were hovering behind them like a Greek chorus of disapproval. Frank had sobered up, or rather he had moved from the sloppy, boisterous phase of drunkenness to the cold, aggressive phase. His tie was retied, his hair was smoothed back. He looked like a man ready to deliver a lecture. "We need to talk about your behavior," he said. I stopped. I looked at the four of them, the wall of family, the fortress of dysfunction. "My behavior?" I asked. "The attitude," Bernie said. She stepped forward, her face pinched. "The silent treatment. Making everyone uncomfortable. You walked out of the ballroom without dismissing yourself." I stared at her. "Dismissing myself? I am 46 years old, Mother. Not 12. Uncle Pat cleared his throat. "Your father is right, Colleen. You have always had a chip on your shoulder. Even tonight. It is Bryn's wedding, for Christ's sake. Can't you just be normal for one night?" Aunt Kathleen chimed in. Her voice was high and whining. "You are making a scene." I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the hysterical laughter of someone watching the laws of physics break down. "I am making a scene," I asked. I looked at Frank. "You knocked a tray out of my hands," I said. "In front of 200 people. You screamed at me. You called me a failure. You spilled champagne on me." I pointed to my ruined shoes. "And I am the one with the attitude." "You see?" Frank turned to the others, spreading his hands. "This is what she does. She turns everything around. She makes herself the victim. It is gaslighting, I thought. Pure and simple. He punched you in the face and then asked why you were bruising his knuckles. "You are always so dramatic," Colleen Burney said. Her voice was ice. "Just like when you were a child, always crying in your room, always wanting attention." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I wasn't crying for attention," I said. "I was crying because he scared me." "Oh, stop it," Frank snapped. "I put a roof over your head. I put food on the table. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me, by embarrassing us, by acting like a servant." "I didn't act like a servant, Dad. You treated me like one, because that is all you are," he shouted. The echo of his voice bounced off the walls. "That is all you made of yourself," he said, stepping closer. "A waitress. A nobody. So don't stand there and look down your nose at me. You are nothing." He was inches from my face. I could see the broken capillaries in his eyes. I could smell the stale whiskey. I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was looking at the floor. I looked at my aunt and uncle, who were nodding in agreement. "Let me understand," I said. My voice was very quiet. "You want me to apologize for being humiliated by my own father at my sister's wedding, for how you made everyone feel," Bernie corrected. "How I made everyone feel." "Yes," she said. I looked at them. The family I had spent my entire life trying to please. The people whose approval I had chased across 2 degrees and $1 billion. They would never see me. It didn't matter if I owned the restaurant. It didn't matter if I owned the state of Massachusetts. In their story, I was the villain. I was the failure. And they would rewrite reality until it fit that narrative. "No," I said. Colleen Burney warned. "No," I repeated. "I am done apologizing for your feelings." I stepped around Frank. He grabbed for my arm, but I moved too fast. "I am done," I said. I walked down the hall. Colleen Frank shouted, "You walk away now, don't you bother coming back. You hear me? You are ungrateful, you are selfish." I kept walking. I pushed through the heavy steel doors at the end of the corridor and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap. It was a crisp October night. The sky was clear, the stars visible above the glare of the parking lot lights. The asphalt was damp. I walked until I was in the shadows, away from the building, away from the cars. I leaned back against the rough brick wall of the dumpster enclosure. I slid down until I was crouching on my heels. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I was shaking again. Not the fine tremor of adrenaline, but the deep, bone-rattling shivers of shock. All is lost. The phrase floated through my mind. I had failed. I had come here to get justice. I had come here to reveal the truth and force them to reckon with it. But you couldn't force a reckoning on people who refused to live in reality. They had won. Frank had rewritten the night. In his version, I was the crazy one. I was the difficult one. And tomorrow, that is the story they would tell. Poor Colleen. She caused such a scene at Bryn's wedding. She has always been unstable. I could leave. My keys were in the locker room, but Ellie had her car. I could text her. We could go. I could fly back to Boston. I could go back to my penthouse. I could go back to being Colleen Doyle, managing partner. I could pretend this never happened. But it had happened. And if I left now, it would be the truth. I would be the girl who ran away. I would be the coward. I buried my face in my knees. I felt hot tears leaking out of my eyes. God, I was pathetic. 46 years old and still crying in the dark because my daddy didn't love me. I heard footsteps on the pavement, sharp, rhythmic clicks. I didn't look up. Colleen. It was Ellie. "I can't do this," I whispered into my knees. Can't do what any of it I said. The reveal. The revenge. I thought if they saw it, they would understand. I thought if I showed them the truth, it would break the spell. I looked up. Ellie was standing over me, silhouetted against the street lamp. She looked like an avenging angel in burgundy silk. But they won't, I said. They can't. They will just spin it. They will say I lied, or that I stole the money, or that I am trying to make them look bad. Ellie didn't say anything. She just watched me. I wanted them to be proud, I confessed. The words tasted like ash, even after everything. Even after tonight. I wanted to walk in there and have them look at me and say, "We were wrong. You did good, Colleen." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. That is never going to happen, is it? Ellie crouched down beside me. She didn't mind her dress touching the pavement. No, she said softly. It isn't. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were warm. They are broken, Colleen. Your father is a narcissist who can't see past his own ego. Your mother is a survivor who sold her soul for peace and quiet. They don't have the capacity to give you what you want. Then why am I doing this? I asked. Why am I putting myself through this? Ellie squeezed my hand. So don't do it for them. She stood up, pulling me with her. My legs were stiff. My shoes were ruined. My face was a mess. Don't do it to make them understand, she said. They won't. Don't do it to get an apology. You won't get one. She looked at the restaurant. The windows were glowing with warmth and light. We could hear the faint sound of laughter. Do it for you, she said. For me? Do it for the girl who got told she would never amount to anything, Ellie said fiercely. Do it for the woman who worked double shifts and studied until dawn. Do it for the person who built an empire in silence because she was told her voice didn't matter. She turned to me, gripping my shoulders. You don't need their validation, Colleen. You never did. You have $2 billion that says you are good enough. You have a staff in there that respects you. You have a life that is big and beautiful, and yours. She shook me gently. But you deserve to say it out loud. Just once. Not for them. For yourself. You deserve to speak your truth and let it hang in the air regardless of how they react. I looked at the brick wall. I looked at the stars. For myself. To stand in that room and say I did this. Not to win their love, but to reclaim my own history. To stop hiding. I took a deep breath. The cold air filled my lungs, clearing out the smell of stale whiskey and fear. I smoothed my shirt. I wiped my eyes. For myself, I repeated. Yeah, Ellie smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. For yourself. And maybe she added, glancing at the door for the look on Frank's face when he realizes he owes you 35 grand. I felt a spark, a tiny hot ember in the center of my chest. I looked at my hand. The scar on my palm was white against the red skin. I am ready, I said. Ellie nodded. She reached into her purse and handed me a tube of lipstick. Fix your face, boss, she said. We have a company to run. I took the lipstick. I used the reflection in the side mirror of a parked car. I painted my mouth a deep, armor-plated red. I turned back to the restaurant. I wasn't going back in there as the daughter. I wasn't going back in there as the server. I was going back in as the owner. Let's go, I said. I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. The service door handle was cold under my palm, a stark contrast to the burning heat I had felt in my chest only minutes ago. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen glowed in the darkness of the alley. I typed 3 letters to Marcus. Now. I hit send. Ready? Ellie asked. She was standing behind me, smoothing the skirt of her burgundy dress. She didn't look like a lawyer anymore. She looked like a second in a duel. Almost. I caught my reflection in the darkened glass of the door. The red lipstick Ellie had given me slashed across my face like a war cry. I straightened my spine. I rolled my shoulders back, letting the tension drop. The server's slouch was gone. The invisible, shrinking posture of the daughter trying not to be noticed was gone. I wasn't going back in there to prove anything to Frank Doyle. I wasn't going in there to beg for a scrap of affection or to scream for an apology I would never get. I was going in there because it was my building, my employees, my food, my wine. I opened the door. The noise of the ballroom washed over me, but it felt different this time. Before, it had been a wall of sound designed to keep me out. Now it just sounded like business. I stepped inside. I didn't take the service path along the wall. I walked straight down the center aisle. My stride was different, longer, confident. My heels struck the floor with a rhythmic, authoritative click that cut through the soft jazz playing over the speakers. Heads turned, not because I was making a scene, but because the energy in the room had shifted. Humans are pack animals. We instinctively know when the alpha enters the room, even if we don't know why. Frank was at table 1, his back to me, but he sensed the change. He stopped talking mid-sentence. He turned around slowly, his brow furrowed in confusion. He looked at me. He looked at the way I was walking. He looked at the way I held my head. For the first time all night, he looked unsure. I kept walking. My eyes were locked on the head table. On Bryn. A hand shot out and grabbed my arm. "Wait!" It was Connor. The groom stepped into my path, blocking my way to his wife. His face was pale, his jaw set. "Connor," I said. I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch. I just looked at his hand on my sleeve until he released me. "The watch," he said. His voice was low, hurried. "The shoes. The way you carry yourself. The way Marcus looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." He took a breath. "You are not a server here, are you?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't just a rich kid surgeon. He was smart. "What do you think?" I asked. I think he said, looking over my shoulder at his father-in-law, that Frank just spent 6 hours humiliating someone he is going to regret humiliating. "Smart man," I said. "I see why Bryn likes you." "Bryn." The shout came from Frank. He was standing up, his napkin crumpled in his fist. He marched toward us, his face blotchy with anger and confusion. "What is this?" Frank demanded. He looked from me to Connor. "Why are you talking to the help, Connor? Why is she bothering you?" "She isn't bothering me, Frank," Connor said. His voice was cold. Frank ignored him. He turned his glare on me. "I thought I told you to leave," he hissed. "I told you if you walked away not to come back. You are defying me." "At your sister's wedding." I didn't answer him. I looked past him straight at the head table. Bryn was frozen. She was staring at me with the terrified eyes of a deer in the headlights. "You told me once you knew," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden quiet of the room, it carried perfectly. Bryn flinched. "At Cousin Maggie's wedding," I continued. "You found the website." "Colleen, please," Bryn whispered. She stood up, her napkin sliding off her lap to the floor. "You have known for 8 years who I am," I said. "You have known what I built." I took a step toward her. "Don't you think it is time you told them I can't?" she choked out. "Then I will." Frank looked between us, his head swiveling like a broken toy. "What? What is she talking about?" "Bryn." Connor turned to his wife. "You knew," he asked. The disbelief in his voice was sharp. "You knew about the watch. About whatever this is." Frank laughed. A nervous sputtering sound. "The watch. We went over this. It is a fake, a Canal Street knockoff. Just like her life." "No," Frank, Connor said. He didn't look away from Bryn. "It is a Patek Philippe Nautilus. It is worth about $45,000. I checked the reference number while you were giving your toast. The number 45,000 hung in the air." Frank blinked. "So, she has a nice watch," he muttered, but the conviction was draining out of his voice. "So what? Maybe she has a rich boyfriend. Maybe she stole it. She has a nice watch." Connor interrupted, his voice rising, "and Christian Louboutin shoes. And your daughter has known for 8 years that there is something you don't know about Colleen." He turned on Frank. "What is it, Frank? What don't you know about your own daughter?" The room was deadly silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving. They were gathered by the service doors, watching, waiting. Frank looked at me. He looked at the watch on my wrist. He looked at the red lipstick. He looked at the way I was standing there, calm and untouchable in the center of the storm he had created. "What is this, Collie?" he whispered. "My name," I said clearly, "is Colleen." I took a breath. "And there is something I need to tell you." I looked at Bryn. She was shaking. She looked at her husband, who was looking at her like she was a stranger. She looked at our father, who looked like his world was tilting on its axis. I knew Bryn sobbed. The words burst out of her. "I knew! Okay, I knew, Bryn!" Bernie cried out from the table. "Bryn, stop it! You are upset!" 8 years ago, Bryn cried, her composure shattered completely. Drunk at Maggie's wedding. Colleen let something slip about the firm. I Googled it. She looked at Frank, tears streaming down her face. Horizon Capital Partners. Frank stared at her blankly. "What is that? What is Horizon?" "It is a private equity firm," Dad Bryn shouted. "Based in Boston. $2 billion under management." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "And Colleen isn't a waitress. She is a managing partner." Silence. Absolute vacuum-sealed silence. Frank's face went through a kaleidoscope of colors. Red, purple, gray. Confusion warred with disbelief, and then slowly, horribly understanding began to dawn. That is ridiculous," he stammered. He looked at me, pleading for it to be a lie. "She works here. She served me the wine. She is a waitress. She owns here, Dad." Everyone turned. Connor had pulled out his phone. He held it up the screen, glowing bright in the dim room. "I just looked it up," Connor said. His voice was clinical precise. The surgeon delivering a diagnosis. Horizon Capital Partners acquired the Emerald Table Restaurant Group this morning. 12 locations. $85 million. He lowered the phone. He looked at Colleen. "You bought the restaurant," he said. "It wasn't a question. You bought the restaurant where your sister works, where your family booked her wedding, where they spent all night humiliating you." Murmurs erupted through the crowd like a brush fire. I saw my Uncle Pat's jaw drop. I saw my Aunt Kathleen clutch her pearls. I saw the staff exchanging glances, nodding. I watched the math being done in real time. I watched Frank Doyle realize that every insult he had thrown, every sneer about my uniform, every joke about my tips had been delivered to the person who signed the paychecks. "No," Frank whispered. He took a step back, bumping into the table. "No, this isn't..." I smiled. It wasn't the polite, deferential smile of the daughter. It wasn't the customer service smile of the server. It was a smile that reached my eyes. "Hi, Dad," I said. I spread my arms, welcoming him to the reality I had lived in for 28 years. "Welcome to my restaurant." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum where all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room by the sheer weight of the truth. Marcus stepped forward. He moved with the precision of a Swiss watch, cutting through the tension like a blade. He held a thick manila folder in his hand. "Ms. Doyle," he said. He didn't look at Frank. He looked only at me, deferential and professional. "The documents you requested." Frank found his voice. It was a strangled, wet sound. "This is insane," he sputtered. He looked around the room, begging someone, anyone, to agree with him. "You can't just... A waitress can't just buy a restaurant chain." "I was never a waitress, Dad," I said. I took the folder from Marcus. The paper felt heavy, substantial. I was doing due diligence. It is how I evaluate every acquisition. From the ground up, you have to know where the cracks in the foundation are before you sign the check. I opened the folder. The sound of the paper turning was loud in the quiet room. "Take the signature dish," I said. "The lamb stew you enjoyed so much. The one you mocked." Frank's jaw worked, but no words came out. "You know where that recipe came from?" I asked. "It is Irish stew," Frank muttered, his eyes darting to the exits. "It is traditional. What does that matter? It came from Grandma Doyle, I said. She taught it to me, in her kitchen in Southie when I was 12 years old. While you were watching the game, she was teaching me how to layer flavors. I pulled out a document. It was a copy of an old contract yellowed at the edges. And when I was 22, I sold that recipe to Mickey Sullivan for $15,000. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. It paid for my first year at Wharton, I said. The signature dish of this restaurant, the one that has anchored the menu for 2 decades, exists because of me, because I wasted my life learning to cook. I let the page fall to the table. It landed next to Frank's empty whiskey glass. But that is not the most interesting thing in this folder, I said. I turned to a new page. This one was crisp. Recent. 2 years ago, you borrowed $50,000 from Mickey Sullivan, the previous owner. Frank stiffened. His face went from red to a ghostly mottled gray. That is none of your business, he snapped. That was a private arrangement. You told Mom it was an investment in Bryn's future, I said. I looked at my mother. She was staring at Frank, her eyes wide and horrified. You told her it was for a down payment on a condo. I turned back to Frank. It wasn't. You don't know what you are talking about, Frank shouted. He took a step toward me, aggressive, blustering. I saw the gambling receipts during due diligence, Dad. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The truth didn't need volume. Mohegan Sun, Foxwoods. You used $50,000 to cover bad bets. You didn't invest in your daughter. You invested in a blackjack table. You can't prove that I don't have to prove it, I said. I just have to collect it. I held up the promissory note. When I bought this restaurant, I bought all outstanding debts, including yours. I took a step closer to him. You owe me $35,000, Dad. The whisper that went through the room sounded like a wave crashing. 35,000. It was a number that carried weight. Frank looked at the document. He looked at me. He looked small, the giant who had dominated my life, the voice that had made me shrink for 46 years, was just an old man with a gambling problem and a bad loan. You can't... He was sputtering now, his hands shaking. Marcus stepped forward again. He didn't ask for permission. He just moved, placing himself between me and Frank's flailing desperation. Mr. Doyle, Marcus said. His voice was cold granite. I have worked with your daughter for 6 months. Not because she needed the job, but because she wanted to understand the business before she bought it. He held up his hand. He pointed a finger at me. At my left hand. See that scar on her palm? I resisted the urge to curl my fingers. She got that when she was 19, working the line at a restaurant in Cambridge to pay her tuition, Marcus said. She burned herself bad. 3rd degree. She bandaged it up and showed up for her next shift anyway. Marcus looked at Frank with barely concealed contempt. That is not someone who can't handle hard work. That is someone who earned everything she has. Everything you spent tonight telling her she would never achieve. Frank opened his mouth, but Ellie stepped into the gap. She moved like a shark in burgundy silk. She flipped open her moleskin notebook. Eleanor Vance, she said. Horizon Capital Partners Legal Counsel. She smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It had no warmth in it. I have documented 17 defamatory statements made tonight. Witnesses for 12 of them. Time-stamped. Frank went pale. You can't. I was just talking. Defamation is actionable when it causes harm. Ellie said, her voice smooth and lethal. You publicly called your daughter worthless, incompetent, and a failure. You did this in front of 200 witnesses, including business associates and potential partners. She tapped the notebook against her palm. That could affect her professional reputation. In the world we operate in, Mr. Doyle, reputation is currency. And you just tried to devalue a very expensive asset. I didn't. Frank looked at Bernie, but she had turned away from him. I didn't mean it like that. "We are not going to sue you, Mr. Doyle," Ellie said. She closed the notebook with a sharp snap. "But only because Colleen asked me not to. You should thank her. Again." The room was utterly still. Frank stood in the middle of his daughter's restaurant, surrounded by the wreckage of his own ego. He looked at the guests. He looked at his wife. He looked at the daughter he had spent a lifetime diminishing. His voice cracked. "I didn't know." "No," I said. I walked over to him. I stood right in front of him. I was wearing heels, and for the first time I realized I was looking down at him. "You didn't want to know. There is a difference." I handed the folder back to Marcus. "Keep the debt," I said. Frank blinked. "What?" "Consider it a gift," I said. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I looked for the anger that had fueled me for decades. I looked for the hurt. It was gone. "I don't need your money, Dad," I said. "I never did." "Then what do you want?" he whispered. It was the question. The only question that mattered. "I used to want you to be proud of me," I said. My voice was steady. I built an empire in silence, hoping that someday if I just got big enough, if I just got successful enough, you would finally see it. You would finally say something different. I shook my head. But that is not what I want anymore. Bernie spoke for the first time. Her voice was thin, wavering. "Colleen, I don't need your approval, Mom," I said. I turned to her. "I don't need yours either, Dad. I never did." I laughed, and it wasn't bitter. It was almost light. I just didn't know it. For 28 years, I didn't know it. I thought I was empty without it. But I wasn't empty. I was just waiting. "I wanted you to see me," I said to Frank. "I wanted you to admit you were wrong." I paused. "But you can't give me that. It is not in you. And that is actually okay." I turned to address the room. To the aunts and uncles who had whispered, to the cousins who had nodded. "I didn't reveal this to humiliate my father," I said. "I revealed it because I was tired of hiding. I was tired of being ashamed of my own success because it didn't look like what he wanted." I smiled. A real smile. "I am not ashamed anymore." I turned to Bryn. She was standing next to Connor, her face streaked with mascara, clutching his hand like a lifeline. "This restaurant," I said, gesturing to the room, employed my sister for 3 years. It gave her a career she loves. I took a breath. And starting Monday, she is getting promoted to general manager of the flagship location. Bryn's head snapped up. "What? You earned it, Bryn," I said, "long before I ever bought this place. Marcus showed me your numbers. You are the best floor manager in the district." I met her eyes. "I am not here to punish you. I never was." I turned back to my parents one last time. "You can keep the debt. You can keep whatever story you tell yourselves about tonight to sleep better. But I am done being the scapegoat. I am done being the lesson." I straightened my shoulders. "My name is Colleen Margaret Doyle, Managing Partner, Horizon Capital Partners. I have spent 28 years proving everyone in this room wrong about me." I looked at the exit. "And I am done proving anything." I walked toward the door. The crowd parted instantly. "Colleen." It was Bryn. She caught my arm on the front steps of the restaurant. The night air was cool and clean, smelling of rain and dead leaves. "Wait," she said. "Please." "What? I am sorry." She was crying again, but these were different tears. They weren't the panicked tears of a child caught in a lie. They were the heavy tears of an adult facing herself. 8 years, she said. I could have. You could have. I agreed. I didn't offer her an excuse. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't okay. But it was over. You didn't, I said. But you are my sister Bryn. That doesn't disappear just because our parents are broken. She looked at me, searching for the anger I used to carry. "The promotion," she said. "Did you mean it?" "I don't say things I don't mean, but after everything—" "You are good at the job, Bryn. That is the only thing that matters to the business." I squeezed her hand briefly. "General Manager, you start Monday. Don't be late." Connor appeared behind her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, supporting her. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and respect. For what it is worth, he said, I knew something was off from the moment I saw those shoes. "Surgeon's eye," I said. "Exactly." He shook his head. "Welcome to the family, Colleen. The real one, I mean. Not the—" He gestured vaguely at the building behind us, at the dysfunction contained within those expensive walls. "Take care of her," I said. "Always." Bryn hugged me then. It was quick, fierce. The kind of hug we used to share when we were kids, hiding in the closet while Frank yelled downstairs. "Thank you," she whispered into my ear. "For not—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "For not being Dad?" I asked. She laughed, a wet, choked sound. "Yeah, for not being Dad. That is the nicest thing anyone has said to me all night." I pulled away. I walked to the curb where Ellie was waiting. The valet had brought her Mercedes around. The engine was purring. Ellie held the passenger door open. "That was quite a speech," she said. "Was it too much?" I asked. "It was exactly enough." She smiled. "How do you feel?" I slid into the leather seat. It enveloped me. I looked back at the restaurant one last time. It was glowing against the dark October sky. My restaurant. My asset. "Free," I said. Ellie got in the driver's side. She put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. We drove in silence for a while. The city lights of Boston blurred past the window, streaks of gold and red. The restaurant shrank in the side mirror until it was just a pinprick of light, and then it was gone. I leaned my head back against the headrest. I looked up through the moonroof at the stars. I thought about the 18-year-old girl who had packed her bags in the middle of the night, the girl who had cried on the bus all the way to Ithaca, the girl who had wanted more than anything for her father to chase after her. She was still in there somewhere. She probably always would be. But she wasn't driving the car anymore. There was a version of this night where I walked in there, dropped the mic, and watched my father crumble into a weeping mess of apology. Where I got the Hollywood ending. That isn't what happened. Frank Doyle didn't apologize. He probably never would. He would wake up tomorrow and tell himself a story where he was the victim, where I was the cruel, ungrateful daughter who ruined a wedding. Let him. That was his burden to carry now, not mine. "What are you thinking?" Ellie asked, glancing over from the driver's seat. "I am thinking I should have done this years ago," I said. Would it have worked years ago? I considered it. The fear, the need, the desperate hunger for validation. "No," I said. I wasn't ready. And now I touched my left palm. I traced the line of the old burn scar. The skin was tough there. Resilient. It had healed over a long time ago. "Now I am ready for whatever comes next," I said. The car merged onto the highway, picking up speed. The road ahead was wide and open. Behind me, a family that had tried to make me small. Ahead of me, an empire I had built with my own 2 hands, and finally, after 28 years. Nothing to prove. We all have a Frank Doyle in our lives. Maybe it isn't a parent. Maybe it's a partner, a boss, or even an old friend who simply refuses to see you for who you really are. You know that feeling, don't you? That exhausting, heavy weight in your chest when you are constantly auditioning for a role in someone else's life, waiting for them to finally applaud. Colleen spent 28 years building an empire in the dark, fueling her ambition with the desperate hope that if she just became successful enough, rich enough, or powerful enough, her family would have no choice but to love her. But here is the brutal, necessary lesson we must take from her journey. You cannot force someone to value you by overachieving. The trap Colleen fell into, and the one so many of us fall into, is believing that our worth is a debate we can win with enough evidence. We think that if we just present the right Exhibit A, like a Patek Philippe watch or a massive business acquisition, the people who hurt us will suddenly wake up and apologize. But true toxicity doesn't work that way. Narcissism doesn't operate on logic. It operates on ego. When you are dealing with people committed to misunderstanding you, your success doesn't look like triumph to them, it looks like a threat. They will move the goalposts every single time. If you become a doctor, they will say you work too much. If you buy the restaurant, they will say you are showing off. If you wait for their validation to feel whole, you will be waiting forever. Colleen's true victory tonight wasn't buying the emerald table or revealing her fortune. Her victory was realizing that the apology she starved for was never coming and deciding she didn't need it to survive. Real freedom isn't about proving your doubters wrong. It is about proving yourself right and then walking away before they have a chance to respond. It is about handing back the emotional debt, the guilt, the obligation, the need to explain yourself, and driving your own car toward your own horizon. You have to stop writing your story in the margins of theirs. You are the author, not the editor. I want to hear from you now. Is there someone in your life you are still secretly trying to impress? Are you holding on to a success, big or small, waiting for the right moment to reveal it, hoping it will finally change how they treat you? Or have you had your own parking lot moment, where you realize that your peace was more expensive than their approval? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the moment you stopped running and started owning your own worth. Remember, you don't need a billion-dollar portfolio to be valuable. You just need to realize that the only person you need to impress is the one staring back at you in the mirror.